Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle, and welcome to the National Parks Expedition Challenge. So today we're at the Pearl Harbor National Memorial on the island of Oahu, and we're here with our newest friend, Ranger Jason. Well, Ranger Jason, thank you for allowing us to be here today.
It's an honor to share this with you, ma'am.
Well, we're excited also. Can you tell us how you got into the National Park Service? Because you have an interesting journey.
Oh my God, yes I do. Believe it or not, I have my father to, I guess you can jokingly say, blame. From the earliest of ages, as an Army officer, he was always introducing me to U.S. military history. So that would be at least my basis of beginning. I remember when we returned back to the United States in 1993, I became a Bear Scout. And I'm going through my Ranger book and just trying to understand my Scout book and trying to understand what to expect. And there was this one picture that just captivated me. A full color photo of the USS Arizona. And my mom, being very military, you didn't really see much emotion out of her. So she, basically with tears in her eyes, told me the significance of the ship, that it was lost on December 7th and the crew was still aboard. So at the age of 8, I was looking around and said, okay, that means something to me. Eventually, by the time I get into the Air Force and am starting to out-process in 2014, I met a group of about a dozen Pearl Harbor survivors. So who would have thought that in 2014 they would be shaping me? And at that point I realized that Pearl Harbor was going to be my answer, but the question was, how do I get there? In 2015, I started with the Park Service at Antietam National Battlefield. Being a seasonal ranger, you bounce around about every 6 months. So eventually, by November 2017, I'd find myself here and find myself with a permanent position. So it's, as you said, been a pretty amazing journey.
So you said that your mom had tears in her eyes when she told you about the USS Arizona. So tell us about this place and your connection to wanting to share this story.
This story has been very interesting. I was a junior in high school on September 11th, 2001. Interestingly, my own family connection, my grandfather was a junior in high school, December 7th, 1941. So you would feel that there was a direct connection. Of course, I was going to go in the military. That was my desire. He dropped out of high school and went into the Navy. But again, it gives you some connection. The firsthand accounts that I've gotten to listen to have made this very special. Of course, that group of Pearl Harbor survivors who's actually grown in years since my initial meeting of them, that has become the foundation of my interest in the story. No longer are these just pieces of steel sitting in the harbor. These are individuals I got to know. For example, Benjamin James Smith, who was a storekeeper third class aboard the battleship California. He's a very special story to me because he's one of the first, but also he was on, I can gently say this, he was on hospice when I came out here. So he lived just long enough to know that I got this position. And when I told his daughter, she told me that he was not able to see me when I visited him in California, but he was the happiest she had seen him in years.
This place brings up a lot of emotions. When did it become part of the National Park Service? And what is the story here?
Okay. So Pearl Harbor, of course, happens on the morning of 7 December 1941. The memorial itself that we know of as the Arizona Memorial begins in 1958, at least the building process. She is completed on Memorial Day 1962. Starting out, it is solely a Navy venture. By 1980, the National Park Service becomes involved, and it's, as a nice way of putting it, a delicate marriage between the Department of the Navy and the Department of the Interior, because the ship still belongs to the Navy, but the memorial belongs to the National Park Service. And the whole aspect of understanding here is this is only square one to America's entry to the most costly war in human history. So America's dates in World War II begin here at Pearl Harbor, 7 December 41. But as you fast forward to 1998, we get the final piece of that story. There's another ship in the harbor, the battleship Missouri. She's not here December 7th, but on 2 September 1945 in Tokyo Bay, Japan would surrender on the deck of the Missouri, ending World War II. So having the two bookends, so to speak, here helps us understand more thoroughly America's involvement in the Second World War. Yes, our focus is specifically the Pacific War, but that's one of basically three theaters of war that the United States found itself in. The Pacific War, which also comprises CBI, China, Burma, India. Early in the war, North Africa, and of course the European front.
When you think of December 7th, 1941, and you think of the day that will live in infamy, many of these students that are watching you don't have those connections because they're in elementary school. So even thinking back to their parents or great-grandparents. But for them, can you just give us the story that day?
Sure. So at 7:55 on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor is one of the locations that is the most talked about location is hit. Believe it or not, the first location hit was Wheeler Army Airfield in the center of the island at 7:40. And then systematically, the Japanese are going to attack the airfields first to get what is called air supremacy. You want control of the air before you start attacking the harbor. So you don't have to look over your shoulder expecting to find an American fighter behind you. So 7:55 is the moment that we here focus on because of the Navy connection to the Arizona. Arizona would race to general quarters or their battle stations and begin to fight back almost immediately. But sadly, her story lasts only 11 minutes. At 8:06, a bomb works its way through the forward section of Arizona and finds what is called the magazine. This is where all the smokeless powder and black powder are kept. And over 1 million pounds goes off in almost a single second. At that point, the most costly loss in the history of the U.S. Navy will commence. Unfortunately, 1,177 will be lost of the USS Arizona. She is one of nearly 200 vessels that are here in the harbor that morning and one of 21 vessels heavily damaged or sunk. The piece that most people don't talk about is the recovery operation. From December 1941 through about the midpoint of 1943, 18 of these ships will be refloated and get back to military service. Arizona is one of 3 that never get back. She and Utah, which is a training ship, are still here today. The battleship Oklahoma would have the second greatest loss of life that day. She is refloated in 1943, but kept here until 1947 and sold for scrap because of the amount of damage that she had received.
Can you tell us why the Arizona wasn't lifted and moved?
Believe it or not, it was a desire initially to scrap her. But by the time the war ends in 1945, well, first off, let me state that they were focusing on the other ships that could get back into the fight. By the time we get to 1945, we have a change of command. And with a change of command, you have a different outlook. By that point, an individual is going to make his way onto the scene. His name is Admiral Radford. He actually survived the events of December 7th aboard the submarine USS Dolphin. So he had a different philosophy of what's going to happen to the Arizona. He will dedicate the first memorial to Arizona in 1950, and that, of course, will stay there till 1958. At that point, the territory of Hawaii is about to become a state the following year. They are approached by the federal government, and the question comes up at this point, where is the first U.S. federal memorial to World War II going to be located? I cannot think of a better location than the USS Arizona. So as I stated earlier, from 1958 to 1962, that memorial will be established and become the first federal memorial to the Second World War. And again, I could not think of a better location, the single greatest loss of life in the history of the Navy and also America's genesis to World War II.
And when we visited yesterday, one of the, not requirements, but the suggestions from the Rangers were to be very quiet and respectful. So that makes me think that people come here to actually look on that wall to find relatives or people that they may have known. What are some stories about people coming back here?
I mean, I've gotten a chance to know at one point the last remaining 5 survivors of the Arizona. One of them actually is a pretty harrowing tale. Loren Bruner was his name. He was a fire controlman second class on the morning of 7 December 41. He was in what is called the Mark 19. It's a fire director on the forward mast, and he's one of only 5 to actually survive the Arizona from that forward section. There are 335 survivors, but again, he's one of 5 from that forward section, so his story is very important to me at that point. As his life came to a close in 2019, he requested to go back to the USS Arizona. And when he passed on 7 December 2019, his request was granted, becoming one of now 45 to go back to the Arizona. He is one of 4 of the interments or burials I have been a part of, but the only one I personally knew. So there's a homecoming in that aspect, but also you can imagine the Arizona takes on a different image to me now. I've known several individuals who survived it, but he's the only one I've known to physically go back to the Arizona. So it just makes my connection to the Arizona even stronger.
I noticed that when we went on yesterday, I would assume that a lot of those people didn't have connections, but it was still very powerful. In fact, our 6-year-old grandson even teared up, thinking about all the boys, he said, that died way too young. One of the things that we encourage our students to do during these virtual experiences is to solve a problem that a national park has. And we've decided today that we're not going to go that route.
Okay.
We're going to encourage our kids to learn about our history, reflect on our history, and think of ways that we can make things better for those around us to be a good human. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds great.
One more thing before we end today. There's a lot of students that will be watching this, Jason, and they want that hat. They really want to wear one of those hats someday. Can you look in that middle camera right there and just give them some advice on how they too can become a park ranger?
Glad you asked me that. That was actually something that I never knew to ask. I actually remember going to the Arch when I was younger and watching a living history presentation. One individual was dressed up as Annie Oakley, the other one as Buffalo Bill Cody. And I remember at that point saying, I could do this. So the living history aspect was a draw to me. At Antietam, for example, we would depict both Union and Confederate soldiers. So what I would recommend, first off, I have my master's in World War II studies and my bachelor's in history and a focus on military history. If you're going to be an interpretive ranger like me, you have to have at least a bachelor's degree. What I would recommend, the National Park Service holds multiple opportunities. First thing I would recommend, definitely work on your studies. That is how I got here. But also, if you have an opportunity as you're getting older into the high school age range, if you have a National Park Service site nearby, start volunteering. That is a great way to get your opportunities out there and hopefully get noticed. I went the military route. Military does give you some opportunities of being picked up through other federal jobs. So there are other options as well. But again, it also depends on your interest level. We have paleontologists that work for us as well as botanists, paleontologists. So you don't have to go the hard history route that I did, depending on what your interest range is.
We also heard at the very beginning that you started thinking about this career as a young boy. So we're going to encourage our kids to think about things that you're already passionate about. As you know, at Expeditions in Education, we like to say that when your passion intersects your purpose, then you have found your career for life. So thank you so much for allowing us to be here today to learn more about this memorial, to try to understand why it's here, and then to encourage us as kids, students, teachers to be good humans. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
So on behalf of Expeditions in Education, this is Dr. Drizzle and this is Ranger Jason, and we are out of here.